I've read these instructions so many freaking times and I'm still second guessing my everything. Cannot find my dang electrical tape. I might worry about it a little bit, but I'm not gonna be super worried about it. Okay. That's red, so. Well, shoot. Okay.
Welcome everyone to Heartland Ham Radio. I'm Michael, Alpha Foxtrot, Zero Foxtrot. Today I'm sharing with you the first of a two-part series of my build of a DX Commander Signature 9 HF antenna. Now I've built antennas before, wire dipoles, Yagis, both HF and VHF verticals, but this build, this was my first time tackling the iconic DX Commander. I wanted an antenna that had a low profile, was multi-band resonant, and after several weeks of research, I was ready to jump in with the DX Commander Signature 9. What follows is a journey in RF engineering, backyard bug warfare, and a few moments of, well, crap. This video is part documentary and part tutorial. If you're thinking about building one of these antennas, I got some tips, but I'll also share some of my mistakes I made along the way so you can avoid them if you decide to build one of these antennas. Now let's get started. Okay, so for this antenna, before I start cutting all the elements, one thing I've learned from watching some videos online and reading the instructions is to make labels for the elements, because I'm going to make all of these out in advance, and when you're assembling the antenna, it just makes it a lot easier if you know which cable you're dealing with. Some of them are close in length and you don't want to mess that up. And then they have to be placed on the plate in a specific order. That's the way the antenna is engineered. So I've got one of these label makers. I've got some yellow UV resistant label tape that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to make up some labels for each of the bands, and hopefully that'll help me stay a little more organized. All right, I finished printing up my labels. I've got little cable flags here. This is 40 through 15, 40, 15, 10 meters, 12, 17, 30, 20 meters. So now I'll be able to label the elements of the antenna. All right, here's what I do. I've got 20 feet of tape measures stretched out on the floor here. Pardon the mess. I haven't cleaned the office for a while, but I'm super excited to build this antenna. And so I'm just unwrapping all of the shrink wrap off of the antenna wire. And I need to cut this to length. Okay, so for the first antenna element, I need 37 feet, 10 1/4 inches. Meters, check. All right, so I have all my antennas elements cut. You can see me measuring several times as I went back and forth. I wanted to make sure I had the right metric to imperial conversion, and then wanted to make sure I clamped it in the right spot. I was a little nervous about the running out of wire. There's going to be plenty of wire, so I've got a ton left on that spool. Thank goodness I had that old 3D printer down there. I just threw that wire on the spool. It made it really easy to put down here. I think my one recommendation or tip would be is to probably start with your shorter elements first to get a hang for how you're going to measure. But it's definitely easier as I started to get shorter because I was not having to double up on the 20-foot tape measure. I've got these all labeled. I think they're ready to go, and we'll be on to the next section. Thanks for joining me.
Full back loop with a 30 meter element is 78 centimeters. All right, so I need the far side of the 30 meter element. $78 centimeters. Cannot find my dang electrical tape. Okay. Second pro tip. Make sure you have all your needed materials up with you, especially when you're shooting videos. I'll be right back. All right, got my electrical tape. I've read these instructions so many freaking times that I'm still second guessing my everything. Okay, so we're gonna fold over the element. These links are included in the cut chart. Do not add more. Fold the tape over on a temporary basis. When you make your loop, leave 3/4 of an inch hole at the top of each loop to allow you to push shock cord through in the field. For now though, use electrical tape and replace all the electrical tape after checking SWR curves with a glue-lined heat shrink. Okay, I'm so thankful this tape measure has both metric and imperial on it. All right, 78. The loop back. I need to make sure I leave 3/4 of an inch for the shock cord. Let's see here. Eyeball this sucker. Okay, so we'll put a piece of electrical tape. And this is temporary. So when I pull this, I'm going to leave a little bit of a flag. Pull this, I'm going to leave a little bit of a flag so it's easier to pull this off later. How many times I put that tight, stretched on there, and then peeling it off is a pain in the butt. Here we go. Double check everything. We're right at 78, and we have a 3/4 of an inch loop at the end of that. Okay, so there's the fold back for the 30-meter element. All right, so I'm gonna wrap this back up. All right, 30-meter element done. Okay, so the next fold back, 104 centimeters on the 20-meter loop. Okay. It's going to be a little longer here. I'm going to leave myself a little extra room. All right. So like that. Leave myself 3/4 of an inch. Wrap this tape around here temporarily. Let the instructions say 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to make it 3/4 of an inch. All right. So we're exactly 3/4 of an inch on that fold back. Okay. We have 6 centimeters on the 17-meter loop. 6 centimeters is right there. And at this point, I think I can eyeball this 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to be in the ballpark anyway. It's just temporary. Column says it's temporary. I'm not going to get super worried about it. I'm not worried about it a little bit, but I'm not going to be super worried about it. Okay. And 17-meter element, full back is done. Okay, so on the 12-meter element, it's another 6 centimeters. About 3/4 of an inch. Double check it. 6 centimeters, we're good. And 3/4 of an inch. 17-meter element is done. All right, 10-meter, also 6 centimeters. I'm gonna be really good at this 6 centimeter. All right, I'm getting the hang of this thing now. 10-meter, 6 centimeter loop is done. Okay, but we do need to create a tension loop at 15 feet 9 inches. I need to double check the tension loops. Instructions. Okay, read this instruction. Instructions kind of show here. Just going to create like a little bit of a loop to put that in there. So the hole needs to be 3/4 of an inch, and we're going to do a little bit of heat shrink tubing. Tension loop at 15 feet 9 inches. I don't see anywhere else. So on the signature 9 column has our tension loop specified in feet. The entire element is only 24 feet 5 inches. It's a little interesting. Okay. A little research needed on this one. I'll be back. All right, so I'm going to cut or put the tension loop in for the 40-meter element. The instructions say this needs to be done at 15 feet 9 inches as measured from the bottom of the driven element. So I'm going to go put driven element piece down there. I'll come up here 15 feet 9 inches. I'll put the loop in, and that should work. We'll see how this goes. All right, so 15 feet 9 inches. Put a tension loop. I'm gonna do this with tape to start. I do need to remember to put the heat shrink tubing on here before I get too much soldering out of the way. So we'll see how this goes. I need 3/4 of an inch. That's about right there. Leave myself just a little bit of a flag here. All right, 15 feet, and I've got the tension loop. All right, I think that's all I'm going to do for tonight. Of course, I left that clip down there. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do for tonight. Man, I read the instructions so many times, and I still caught myself going back and forth. I don't know, maybe that's just perfectionist personality or something. Hope I did everything right. The good news is, I think I'm going to have, there's barely any wire off of that. I've got a whole nother spool of this. I know I gotta make a lot of radials. The length on that's gonna be much less important, or not as exact. So good news is if I have to redo one of these, I don't think it's the end of the world. So anyway, that's the first night of my DX Commander. So appreciate you hanging out with me. This has been fun. More to come. I can't wait to put this thing together. We'll see you. All right, so it took me a second to kind of get the crimp length figured out, but I think we got this right at maybe just a smidge over a 1/2 inch. Okay, so now the instructions say to fold this over, build that up a little bit. Oops, almost forgot the heat shrink tubing. Wouldn't have been detrimental at this phase. They could have gone over the other side, but so go ahead and crimp this. And I think if I looked at this right, that red size is going to be probably ideal. So where you need 3 hands. Glad it does say double that over. It is definitely a good idea. Yeah, that might have been the wrong size. Well, okay. Plan B here. Well, shoot. Okay, so we're not going to use the red side. That might be just a little aggressive. We'll go with the blue. Blue it is. Okay, that's pretty secure. That was the 17-meter element. I'm going to get these all stripped, put on, then we'll solder them. Okay, so this is the 12-meter element. So I'm learning some things here as I go. Okay, so I'll put the heat shrink tubing on. Just like that. Fold this over. We're going to use the blue side this time. Okay, that's nice and secure. So when I solder that, we'll push that over. That heat shrink tubing will come up over that. All right, that's the 12-meter element. It's actually going pretty quick. I say that now, I'm gonna jinx myself. I'm gonna have one of these go sideways and I have to completely recut it. That gets me about the 1/2 inch mark. Okay, give this a little bit of a twist. Put the heat shrink tubing on, then double this over. Give it a crimpy crimp. All right, I'm gonna position that in there first and then put this in, then crimp it down. You know, you get better at each one of these that you do. All part of the experience. All right, so this is the 20-meter element. Get the hang of this thing now. Okay, we'll do, that's a little closer to that 1/2 inch mark. We'll double this over. Here's the 30-meter element. So 30 meters. All right, we're getting the hang of this now. We are cooking with gas. All right, I started with the 10-meter element because last night when I was cutting the links, I should have started with the shorter elements. It would have been a little easier to kind of handle. Anyway, if I had to like messed up one of the early ones, wouldn't have to cut quite as much wire to make it work. All right, so there's the 30-meter element. All right, one more to go. All right, here's the 15 and 40-meter element. So this is the longest on the Signature 9. All right, last piece of heat shrink tubing down and over. Can't believe I didn't forget one of those. That's usually how it goes. All right, got that doubled over. We'll get our connector put into our crimper here. All right, so we got all the ends crimped on. We've got the heat shrink tubing that goes over the top. Next piece will be, I'm gonna kind of clean this part up a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and solder these connectors on with a little bit of solder. And then once it cools, I will push the heat shrink tubing over top. One of the things I saw when I was watching some videos is if you solder immediately and push this up and over, the residual heat from the soldering process can start to shrink that tubing before you get it kind of pushed up and over to completely seal this end here. So kind of a pro tip I learned from watching other people's videos. So I'm going to do that same process. So I'll go through, I'll solder all these, let them cool. By the time I get back to the first element after soldering, I'll be ready to do the heat shrink tubing on this one. So, all right, we'll be back in a second. All right, so I've got this clipped in. It's been a little while since I've soldered, so we'll see how this goes. I think that definitely needs to be hotter. All right, I think 700 Fahrenheit is about the sweet spot for that. All right, so we got all the ends soldered on. Wasn't too bad. I hadn't soldered in quite a while, so it actually worked pretty well. I'd never worked with a, and this is how long it's been. I've never worked with a lead-free solder before. Definitely has to be a little warmer, but actually did pretty well. So I was pretty happy with this. So, all right, we got the connectors on. We'll let these cool just a little bit, and then I'm gonna put the heat shrink tubing on, and we'll get that heated up with a heat gun. So got this part done.
All right, so in the last video, we got the fork connectors crimped and soldered on, and those have cooled down now. They're cold to the touch. The next piece of this is now that the end is cool, we're going to push the heat shrink tubing up and past where the tip of that exposes. It's just going to keep all the elements secured. And this is glue lined heat shrink tubing. So this is going to seal up nice. So I've got my heat gun here, and we're just going to run through and heat these up and shrink that tubing down. Colum in his video said just kind of squish that glue around there a little bit. All right, so we got our first one done. Sealed up pretty nice. Okay, I think on this next one, I'm just gonna push this up just a smidge higher. I thought it was maybe too high, but I think we really want it up as much as possible. So we'll do that on this next one. It's pretty darn hot. Just gonna squish this down with a piece of paper. All right, yeah, I liked how that one turned out a lot better, nice and tight all the way around. I do like that recommendation of soldering. I do feel like that will make just a little better protection from the elements. All right, 12 meter elements. Might have been the tightest seal one I've got so far, but see it there, nice and tight all the way around. All right, it's a 20 meter element. All right, here's the 30 meter element. This pushed up in there. Definitely getting better at this as I go. This may be one of my better ones. All right, 30 meter element. One more to go. All right, here's the 40 meter and 15 meter element. All right, here we go. All right, we got this one done. Pretty happy with that. Thank you for joining me for my first part of my DX Commander Signature 9 build. We've got all the elements and the tension loops and foldovers completed. We've done crimping and soldering of the driven elements as well as the radials. We've got the ground post installed, and we've got the driven plates and the ground plates all ready to go. So in the next video, this will be the fun part. We'll be installing the radials, we'll do the mast assembly, as well as get all the antenna elements fit onto the antenna. We'll do some final tuning, and I'll share with you my first contacts. So for now, we'll say 73. I'm Michael, Alpha Foxtrot, 0 Foxtrot. We'll see you real soon.